Good on. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the minutes of the Audit Committee. Welcome to Grant and Mary from our external auditors. And on screen, David Basner, fellow member, who is going to ask a question at members' question time. I think we've got a quorum, even though we are too short at the moment. So we will go straight to apologies for absence and notification of substitutes.
We've received an apology from Councillor Simon Harris, and Councillor Jeff Anderson will be substituting for him
when he arrives. Thank you. Disclosable pecuniary interest. Members are reminded that they must declare their disclosable pecuniary interest. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests? No. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 29th of July. Can I sign these as a correct record before we discuss anything arising? Thank you. Any matters arising from the minutes? I have one matter arising. This refers to page 3 of your papers, item 18. In response to a query, the internal audit manager confirmed there were still vacancies within the audit team, but they were currently being recruited with a closing date at the end of July. Would you like to briefly update us on the position with the audit team? Katie, sorry.
Yes, unfortunately we didn't make any appointments in that last round of recruitment, so we are looking to go out to recruit again, and Barry Hanson will be providing an update in the internal audit performance report on some other changes to the resources at the moment.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Okay, that's my only point. So we've approved the minutes. There are no further matters arising. We can now ensure that there are no public questions.
No public questions were received.
No public questions received. The next item is member questions, and I'm pleased to welcome David Basner, one of our colleague members, who has a question which he's going to read out himself. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. My question is this. At the last full council meeting on 21st of September, the lead member for finance presented a capital strategy which was passed by Conservative councillors despite criticism from opposition members. This strategy included £95 million of borrowing required to complete the North West Road. The Director of Finance said that this inclusion was a mistake, and in his explanation he made the following comment. This was in effect a holding figure often used by finance officers when modelling potential costs or budget projections, and was not derived from the consultation or information from the project team or operational officers involved in the North West Road. Will the Audit Committee now investigate the costings of the North West Road, because they could present a real threat to the financial stability of the council for two reasons? A, escalating building costs and regulatory concerns of the Environment Agency means there's a real chance that the road may be cancelled or the planning application fail. This will mean that over £20 million of the capital expenditure, approximately 24 million, will be transferred from a capital account to the revenue account. B, given that any extra expenditure over the original estimate of the road's costs must be funded by the council, the Director of Finance makes it clear that finance officers are considering the possibility of 95 million or more in extra borrowing may be required to complete the road, and the extra interest on such a sum would make the tackling the projected deficit more difficult. Both scenarios could prompt the issue of a Section 114 notice making the council in effect bankrupt. Will the Audit Committee now investigate the funding of the North West Road as a matter of urgency? Failure to do so may result in future investigations as to why the committee did not manage risk as it is required to do so, as set out in the accounts and audit regulations. And I quote, ensuring that the financial management of the body is adequate and effective, and the body has a sound system of internal control which facilitates the effective exercise of that body's functions and which include the arrangements for the management of risk.
Thank you, David. James Walton, our Section 151 officer, will respond to that. James.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a prepared answer which will be circulated shortly. Thank you, Councillor Basma, for your question. It raises a number of points, the key element of which appears to be, will the Audit Committee investigate the costings of the North West Relief Road due to the threat it poses to the Council's finances? The role of the internal audit team is to provide independent and objective assurance on the Council's activities. It does this by evaluating the effectiveness of risk management, control and governance processes. The Audit Committee approved the internal audit plan for 23-24 in February 23, and this included an audit of the North West Relief Road project. This audit is currently in progress and appears to cover the key elements of your question. The management control objectives under review are that recommendations made in the previous audit have been implemented, appropriate governance arrangements are in place which govern the project, appropriate project management arrangements are in place to manage the project, administrative arrangements are in place to monitor, control and report on the budget, interdepartmental dependencies are in place and decision making is made in conjunction with the project outcomes, and appropriate management arrangements are in place with consultants and stakeholders. The internal audit will examine the process for establishing an approved budget, authorising expenditure and the process for monitoring and reporting the financial position. It may also challenge the validity of assumptions around projections. Internal audit are unable to provide detailed costings for the project, as this is the role of the project officers supported by the finance team. In line with our normal process, the results of the audit will be shared with the Audit Committee once the report is finalised. The audit work has been delayed due to outstanding requests for information with the service area and the contractor. If required, an update can be provided at the November Audit Committee meeting. However, we cannot guarantee the report will be finalised and reported at that meeting. It is proposed that the internal audit review continues, and once finalised, the results are considered by the committee to decide then if any further action or management assurances are required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. So as you will see, we are proposing to have a further report at the November committee. I don't think that we can.
Chairman, is there a subsequent question which the questioner can actually ask?
I'm about to come to that.
As a result of what was said?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm about to come to that if you'll allow me to finish, as I'm sure you will. So the point I was making is that there will be a lot more information available when we have it to hand, and it will come to this committee in November when you are welcome to attend to ask questions. So I wonder whether you need to ask a question at the moment, but if you do, I will give you the opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks very much for the answer, which is very full. But I have two concerns really. One is obviously we get the update in November, but when will the final report come? Because I think this is a matter of some urgency now, given the financial situation and given the figures that I've been through. And so therefore, I would hope that we will get a report by the end of the year. And I know that the reference was made to there's been some delays, but I would hope that, you know, this committee would consider a report as soon as possible, because I think it's really serious. And I think that, you know, if it doesn't come to committee very soon, certainly I would hope before the end of the year, then I would be considered talking to referring this to the auditor because of my concerns, because I do think that this is a very serious matter. The sums of money are large, and the situation.
David, we've got the point. You want to refer to the report. The external auditor is listening to what you're saying and nodding his head, which sounds a useful and beneficial situation, and great. I can assure you that you will get as much information as our staff have available or can make available but in November. So I hope that you will be satisfied. We haven't got a meeting before November, and I doubt very much whether we could complete anything within the next 2 months. So I hope you will feel that we have tried the best we can to respond to your very valid question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just, it is a matter of urgency, I think. I do think this needs to be given top priority.
I think we would agree with you on that. I think there'll be cross-party agreement across the whole council on that. So I can assure you that I will be pressing James and other relevant officers to ensure that the most comprehensive account possible is available in November.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your attendance. We've no other members' questions. So we will move on to item 6, first line assurance, freedom of information management update. And I invite Tim to introduce or take us through this report as he feels necessary.
Thank you, Chair. Brian asked yesterday for a little bit of context to this report. There isn't a historical context provided to it. Is it not working there?
The lights are on.
Yeah, the lights are on, but
Do you want to try the next one?
Teacher.
any better?
Yeah.
Any better. Right. Thank you. Sorry about that. Just sort of winding back a little bit, this is slightly anecdotal, but I think it was a combination of COVID and the relaxation in the requirements to comply with the Act, a slight loss of focus within the team, a general increase in the number of FOIs at the same time. And I think that that sort of culture developed, and eventually the Information Commissioner caught up with us and said, enough's enough, you're not adequately complying with your legislative requirements, and that led to the issuing of the enforcement notice. I think that we had already recognised that the FOI process needed tightening up, but the enforcement notice gave us that extra impetus, that extra focus. A number of things, as you can see in the report, have now been put in place. I'm presenting it to you, but I have to give most of the credit to Barry and Heather. Barry, in his new role, taking on responsibility for information governance, has given a huge level of scrutiny and focus and energy and determination, very ably backed up, I think, by Heather, who has given this issue an awful lot of her time. I think there's the Power BI dashboard that's mentioned within the report has been extremely helpful, because there's much more live information available about exactly where we are on the FOI process. Barry has been sending weekly updates to all of the directorates, urging them to prioritise this issue. The Igloo oversight has also helped in bringing together the different directorates and saying to them, no, this really is a priority. There's no option here. If we don't comply with the enforcement notice, there are really very serious consequences that could flow from it.
I think it's mentioned in the report that there are potentially contempt proceedings that could be brought against the council. All of those things together as well as the plan that we had to put in place
following issuing of the enforcement notice, I'm happy to say has generated some really quite significant improvements. We're not there yet. We are on an upwards trajectory. The latest figures are set out in paragraph 2.4. I did just check with Barry. There aren't any more up-to-date figures than those. But when we met with the Information Commissioner last month, he was pleased with the progress. Didn't want us to take our foot off the pedal, but that was a far more positive and constructive interaction than the previous meetings that we'd had with him. And I very much got the impression that provided we continued with this upward trajectory, that the enforcement notice would be withdrawn, with the caveat that, you know, if we slip, then that's a very obvious failure that he will pick up. We've given the Information Commissioner access to our own dashboard, so they can see themselves exactly how we are doing on almost a day-to-day basis. Which, I mean, you've got nothing to hide. That's public information. But I think he was extremely he welcomed that transparency, and I think that's improved our relationship with him. So I think that's the overview. We let things slip. I don't think there's any doubt about that whatsoever. We took our eye off the ball. Thankfully to Barry and Heather, there's a much sharper focus now on the issue, a better understanding, I think, amongst the directorates. This isn't optional. This is the law. And whilst the Information Commissioner will allow a little bit of leeway, fundamentally they expect, obviously, the law to be complied with, and we're moving towards compliance with that. Barry, I think, has appointed another member of the Information Governance team very recently. They're going to start in the next couple of months, aren't they? So that'll strengthen the team. So I think the overall message is we are making the right progress towards having the enforcement notice withdrawn.
Tim, I can add on the next steps as well, if you like.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Just in terms of the next steps and the enforcement notice period officially runs until 26th of October. So essentially we have until that time to comply. As Tim alluded to, we're well on our way to achieving that, although there is more room for improvement. At the end of that 6-month period, we will have to prepare a written response to the ICO to demonstrate how we've complied with the enforcement notice, which we will do after the 26th of October. So that will be early November. We will be providing that written report back to the Information Commissioner, at which point they will then consider that and the approach that we've taken. But considering where we were in December 2022, we've made significant improvements, which is positive.
And can I ask if a copy of that report will be available for our November meeting?
I can't guarantee that it will be available for the November meeting, but we can certainly give an update at the November meeting as to the outcome of that. Mm-hmm. It just depends on the timing of that and our interaction with the ICO, but perfectly happy to give an update.
And it could be circulated to audit committee members, couldn't it?
Yes.
Once it's
concluded.
Yeah. Even outside of the meeting. So.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to come to all of you. I'll start with Roger, and then I'll move to Rosemary, and then to Nigel. Roger.
Yeah, it's flashing. Oh, thank you, Chairman. I note the report. I also note there's some red and amber lines in the table at the back. A red one in for September, an induction training. That's on page 21 of the report. of the papers before us today. I note that some temporary staff are now involved, and I also note that the council needs to respond with requests within 20 working days. Obviously, we didn't respond within 20 working days, but I'd also like to know how many reports are there where we ask for extra time. There's no mention of that. We can comply and say, yes, it's noted, needs further investigation. But how many does it mean that we would investigate further? I see April 23, the enforcement notice was issued by the ICO. We haven't had a report here until now. It would have been useful, I think, for the audit committee to be told that this was in progress. I'll leave it at that, Chairman. There is a table at the back, as I say, with one highlighted in red and a number of amber. The red one should have been completed in September. I don't know, and I know we're still in September for the next few days, but it has been highlighted there. Thank you.
In fairness to staff, Roger, I think that they wish to wait for a report to this committee, bearing in mind also that our June meeting is our heaviest of the year. And I think, in fairness, they wish to wait for this committee when they could give some positive information. One of the things I wish members would remember, and I wish even that members of the public would be aware of, is that they cost this council quite a substantial amount of money to answer freedom of information requests, which are not, that money is not being spent beneficially on council services. We're having to employ extra staff to meet these freedoms of information requests at a time when you all know we are extremely hard pressed to make bring expenditure down to match our resources. So I have a great deal of sympathy with the measures that staff are having to take to bring us up to date and the cost that is causing the council. Right,
Chairman, if I can,
all right.
I would not want to be totally associated with that.
Well,
I congratulate the staff, and it isn't the staff's fault to doing it. I think it's the senior management directorate of this organisation not providing sufficient resources for the staff to do it, not putting in place the appropriate processes and the protocols to ensure that it was all complied with. And it is a great pity that the ICO saw and needed to issue that instruction to the council. It should never have happened in a 4-star, and it would never have happened in a 4-star local authority, but it has happened here, and we need to address it. The public need to know what is happening, and they have a right to ask questions and to get answers. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I note your comments, Roger, which are certainly entitled to your view, as on all the matters. We'll now move on to Rosemary, please.
Roger asked,
Yes.
raised a number of questions. You raised a number of issues there, Roger. Is there anything specifically that you wanted us to address?
If I can, Chairman.
Yep.
It is to do with the table there. The red, I know we're still in September, but I presume that this report may have been written some weeks ago. I assume it's being addressed. And the amber ones, can we be assured that they are turning green? Thank you, Chairman.
You have, because that's more your.
Yeah. The action plan that was publicised, which is the table in the appendix in the report that you're referring to there, Roger, is something that we developed back in April when we first received the enforcement notice. It was part of the requirements of the enforcement notice that we did that. Now, the red elements that you're referring to, yes, they're still not currently in place. However, there is work ongoing to develop the training materials in relation to that. So we envisage that they will be done within the next couple of months. However, the resources within the team has been lower. We have been recruiting, but the target, the focus for the team over the summer months has been to clear the backlog of the overdue requests and also improve the processes that we can comply with that 20-day period. That has been the focus. So improving compliance with the legislation has been the paramount focus of the work over the summer, and then the training of relevant officers across the organisation has formed part of that. But we need to get that absolutely right, and that does take a little bit of time. So we're working on that. It is work in progress.
Rosemary, nice to come to you now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't wish to dissociate myself from your comments, Brian, but I'd like to make it clear that I completely disagree with them. I think the freedom of information legislation is really important. It's a sort of keystone of democracy, as it is sort of it's a pragmatic element of democracy. And the council doesn't have any money that doesn't come from the population. So how can the population be demanding the council to spend its money? It's their money, if you like. So for me, it's a fundamental right, and I think that is perhaps what part of the issue has been, and that there's been a resistance to that transparency. And I think it's absolutely essential that we are 100% transparent, which I think is probably not possible, but you know what I mean, that we're able to be agile in a request for transparency. One of the things that, and forgive me if I've missed it in the report, because I've been through it several times looking. Yeah. I just wonder, so we know how many we didn't answer in those last 3 years within 20 days. What I'm wondering is how many, I can see that we caught up with 2022 earlier in this year, but how long did it actually take us to answer those backlog questions from 2021, 22? Is there an average number of days?
Yeah, I can respond on that, Chair. So as part of the original action plan, that was the initial focus of the work. So what was the situation in terms of the older requests, the well overdue requests that we needed to respond to, because that was a particular focus of the ICO when they first took an interest in our response rates. The part of the plan that specifically targeted that ensured that all of those were cleared by June 2023. So by the end of June, we cleared the backlog of requests that went into 2022, and there were a small number that went prior to 2022. So those were all cleared by June of this year.
Sorry, may I come back in?
Yes, certainly.
Yes. So really, what I was asking was, what was the average final time? How long did it take us to respond to all those overdue ones? I know June, but is there an average number of days, for example?
That isn't a figure that I've got to hand currently. What we could do when we provide the update in November, once we've had the final confirmation from the Information Commissioner, I can provide that as part of the update to show that improvement.
Yes, I think that's important, because I think we'd then be able to show an improvement as we go forward, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
On that, and I think it's really important. My understanding, if I may.
Yeah.
My understanding of the legislation is that the answer is supposed to come back within 20 days. But if we can't supply the answer within 20 days, we then have to notify that we can't supply the answer within 20 days. Do we do that at least? Have we done that? We do it now? Did we do it in the past?
That forms part of the procedure. It's part of the legislation. So where the information governance team is made aware of that, and there is a complexity with the request that could involve either a number of exemptions being applied to the release of the information, that's communicated to the requester, and then the idea with that is that the requester then can refine their question, so that it's more appropriate to the level of data that we hold, or the information that we hold that's already public, that we can point them in the direction of. So yeah, that is something that's part of the procedure. Correct.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, thank you. So is that where we are now? And we've always been in that position?
That's always been part of the procedure.
and we've always adhered to it.
That is
It's not
quite-
always, but we've adhered to it in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the enforcement notice was a result of non-compliance with the legislation. So clearly, prior to 2022, we weren't necessarily compliant with that element of the legislation, as well as providing a response within the 20 working days. So from my involvement from April 2023 onwards, we've taken steps as documented within the action plan to address those particular points. And whilst yes, it would always have been part of the procedure, it might not necessarily have been followed.
I beg members to forgive the sins of the past and note that we are trying very hard, or often trying very hard, to make us as near perfect as possible in these matters in the coming months. Rigel, I think you want to come in now.
Yes, ironically, I'm going to start off by agreeing with Rosemary and Roger regarding FOI, that we cannot be seen to be thinking that FOI is a burden, an avoidable burden, and that we have to accept what is something that's set out in the law to have open democracy. My concern is that this whole issue is a reputational damage for Shropshire Council. Now, the chair himself at full council suggested that audit committees should know when things are going to go wrong and are able, hopefully, to get on top of it. So my question is, has the audit team ever reviewed and audited FOI before, and are they planning now to ensure that they have it in their audit scope so that this can't happen again?
Barry, would you like to say something on that?
Haven't got the exact year, but information governance arrangements has been audited in the past on numerous occasions, which would have included the FOI responses. At present, I don't actually have the details of those, but the audit reports would have been reported to the audit committee at the time. Yeah. Sorry.
I can share. Is that working? There we go. Yeah. The last audit we did specifically of freedom of information was in 2018-19, and it was limited. We have done other audits since then that we pick on elements of it around information governance, and as Barry said, those would have been in our past reports, but I can circulate that after the meeting if you like that information.
Okay, thank you. So my concern is we've got strategic risk and we've got internal auditors looking at things. We've had a real bad thing come up in 2022 regarding this, and we've missed it. You know, at the end of the day, we've had the Information Commissioner tell us that we need to put it right. I know you said that we'd realised that this was becoming an issue. I have got a concern that we dropped the ball here, and I don't think you've answered whether it's going to be an audit action for the future, because we need to keep our eye on this now.
Well, I'm quite sure that the report. I'm quite sure that the report shows that we intend to get right up to scratch and keep that way, Nigel. And if I can merely say in defence of my earlier remarks that I don't disagree that freedom of information requests are important. I was merely drawing attention to the fact that they are not costless, that they cost the council money. That was the point I was hoping to make, and I note all your views on the matter. Now I'm going to call in James. Final word.
Thank you. So just to draw a few of the points together, just add a little bit more information around this. There was, going back a few years ago, there was an FOI team as part of the information governance, and the process was, and this is going back several years, the process was, it was a centralised process. So there was somebody kind of in charge and making sure these things were happening across the organisation. A decision was taken several years ago to devolve that, And part of that was because recruitment into the team. So it was then devolved. So it then became the kind of the responsibility of each of the individual teams. And all that the central team was doing was effectively the conduit in and out of the organisation. Over time, as Tim has alluded to, that then has demonstrated a kind of a dropping away of performance. So, were we consistent with the legislation? Well, we were consistent with what the legislation was actually saying, but we weren't hitting the deadlines, and those deadlines are part of the legislation. So there's kind of a moot point around that. So as part of that, when the Resources Directorate was set up, there was then a restructure that was put in place around that. And one of the things that was brought into play was that in Barry's role, a new head of governance role would be brought in, and that would have control of and responsibility for the information governance team. And the idea was that there would then be a centralisation of that function and under a new head of governance, and that would therefore deal with all of the issues that are being raised at the moment. It's just the way these things work that at the point at which Barry had been appointed, the ICO, after several years of seeing his performance, I'm being absolutely serious here, decided to come in and say, I'd like an enforcement notice. At that point then, the idea, which had been agreed, and we'd agreed this at senior management, that the team would then be centralised. What then happened was, we need to comply with this enforcement notice. We cannot comply with that enforcement notice and centralise the team at the same time, because we'll need to recruit to bring people into the team. So I then had to talk to the organisation and say, sorry guys, we said we were going to do this with FOI. We can't. We need to now strengthen what the current arrangements are, the devolved arrangements, to try and hit this the enforcement requirement. That's why Barry has been emailing out, speaking to people on a weekly basis. That's why all the training has gone in place. That's why we've done all the things that we can. And so the actual process, which we would quite neatly kind of dealt with, has had to be delayed. I'd just like to pick on a couple of points. One is in relation to transparency. There's never ever been any resistance to transparency. Never ever any resistance to transparency in relation to FOI. It has purely been around prioritisation. It's been, I need to get this done within 20 days. It's now got to 22 days. It's going to take 30 days. It's going to take 40 days. It was just it will be done. They have all been done. There's never been any shortcuts in relation to that. The information that's gone out is the best information that we're able to provide, and all of the FOIs have been investigated and signed off from at a senior level before they go out. So there's no resistance to transparency whatsoever, but the timescales have been allowed to slip. That's the fundamental issue. And I just want to make it clear that is the issue and nothing else. And just to pick up on Roger's point, this was discussed at the Audit Committee on the 20th of June, as reflected in the minutes. We did talk about FOI, we did talk about the enforcement notice. It was made very clear, and that was the reason why there was a request for a report to come back in terms of progress in relation to that. So this has absolutely been openly discussed and shared, and Audit Committee should be fully aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Well, I think we've given due consideration to the seriousness of this matter, which it deserves. So can we now agree to note progress so far and request a further update at our November meeting? All agreed? Note progress so far and request a further update to our November meeting. And though not part of that resolution, Barry and Katie are going to circulate any the response that we make to the Commissioner
at the end of October.
Yeah, end of October.
End of October, early November. If the timing works in terms of the publication of the agenda for the Audit Committee, we'll do it as part of that.
Thank you, Barry. Right, we will now move on to item. And thank you, Tim. If you wish to leave us now, I don't think there's anything on the agenda which you can assist us. So we're now on item 7, Government Assurance Action Plan Update. And this is going to be introduced by James.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, I should have said earlier, only 2 microphones can work at once. So if you get the green light, it means there's 2 on already, and someone's just got to switch theirs off. So sorry for any confusion around that. So the annual governance statement action plan for 2024, the paper is before you. This was the annual governance statement is presented alongside the statement of accounts and provides the audit committee with a view of the governance arrangements across the authority. The annual governance statement itself sets out all the key principles that are being adhered to and adopted by the organisation, and then sets out any areas where there are significant governance issues which therefore need to be addressed. So with the accounts for the 21-22 financial year, there was an update, an action plan that was produced, and then at the audit committee meeting in June, that action plan was presented with the latest update on where that had progressed. At the same time, the accounts for 22-23 have been produced, and there was also an action plan in relation to that. Some of the action plan for 22-23 included actions which have been carried over from 21-22. So in June, you received 2 action plans. What I have done is pull those together into a single action plan, which is attached as an appendix to the report. So this covers off anything from 21-22, which is outstanding, anything from 21-22 that has been rolled forward into 22-23, and any actions in relation to 22-23 on their own. So the appendix sets out each of those actions, one of which we've just discussed, which was around the position around the freedom of information response times. But there are a number of areas set out there. A completion date has been identified as part of the original action plan. Some of those have been updated, and there is an update as at the end of August, which has been provided by each of the senior managers, the executive directors or CEO, as listed in the column on the left-hand side. They provided an update of their latest position, which hopefully should provide audit committee with some assurance around this process, but also provide that latest position for which any questions or challenges can be raised now. I won't go through that appendix in detail, but happy to take any questions as they arise. Nigel.
I just have to say that when I got to this appendix and I realised it was a one-stop shop for what's going on, I have to say it's incredibly well presented, and I quite enjoyed reading it. It's sad, isn't it? Especially when it's linked in with the strategic risks of the council as well. So going to item 4, to reduce the risk of cyber attack, I've only just picked on this because it annoys me. And you've got the current data protection training completion dates for members at only 51%. So that's half our members that haven't done. I know I've seen the reason why they expire, and it's about trying to get them to do it again. But I think 51% is awful.
Do you wish me to?
Well, yes, I think it's a very good point, actually. I'm even more concerned that there are 7 members who haven't completed the cyber security training. And I do think that it's really up to our group leaders to ensure that all their members have completed it. We've no idea which groups these 7 members belong to, but I guess that a good number belong to the majority group, and I'm going to raise that with my leader, because I'm very concerned about. I'm more concerned about cyber security training and the risks that brings if anybody puts the finger on the wrong button than even than data protection. But the data protection figures, as you point out, are, I think we'd agree, woeful. So it's a very good point you raise, and James will now respond to it.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is a constant battle in terms of managing the training for both cyber security and for data protection, and we do now analyse and measure those separately for officers and members, because we think it's important to demonstrate what the figures are in relation to that. A paper was passed by council, and a revised process is being drawn up. I was speaking to David Baker, our head of technology and automation, yesterday, about where we were in relation to that process. So the simple kind of reaction to this is, if you don't do training, then your laptop gets turned off. That's the kind of the simple way of dealing with it. Of course, it's never ever quite that simple. So a process has been drawn up, which from a technological point of view is deliverable, which is that if the training, there are various chasing emails that get sent out from the system automatically as the date approaches by which the renewal expires. So I think it's a month before, 2 weeks before, a week before, those emails will come out to remind people. If then you reach the date where it's not been provided, further emails will come out to say, if you don't complete it within a period of time, then the machine will be locked. What would then happen is the machine would be locked, and it would only be by telephoning into the help desk that would then be reopened, which would then allow you to do the training, and that would just keep on happening until the training was done. There are a few nuances around that, whereby if there are particular procedures, I won't go into detail, but there are particular procedures around, say, disciplinaries and whatever, where somebody may be switched off, and by then phoning up the help desk to demonstrate that they'd be switched off only because of the cybersecurity, when actually IT wouldn't know that there was actually a disciplinary process or whatever going on, they could inadvertently switch the machine back on. So it's just those sorts of processes, not technological, but those sorts of processes that are just being ironed out to make sure that it's clear that that process would work. That then will allow that to happen, which will remove an element of that risk. The thing to remember, of course, is that even with all of this training being undertaken, people still make mistakes. This is what happens in life. Human errors happen, and when they do, a very, very small error in relation to cybersecurity, for example, can lead to access into all of our systems, and the implications of that can be catastrophic. Therefore, it's important that we try and get as many people to this training as possible, because that does help reduce the risk. But, and as David has said to this committee a number of times, anybody that says we can remove the risk is just not telling the truth. There will always be that risk there.
Thank you, James. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a number of points on this report I'd want to talk about, but picking up the one that's already been raised is in the ICT. By my estimate, there's nearly 400 staff who have not completed the security training. Now, that is staff where council have complete control of, and it is a form of employment, I would have thought, to do it. If there's only 82.5%, that's 15% of staff have not completed. Could be new staff still working through it, but if we employ 3,500, it's 400 members of staff who haven't. The members there, and I think it's up to members to actually, and the group leaders to ensure that's sorted out. But it's up to the directors as well to look at the staff and sort that out, because that is alarming when you have that number of staff doing it. If you look at part-timers, I expect it is more. But leaving that, Chairman, to come on to the previous page, on page 35 and 3, I see one of the ones is supposed to be done by December 23, and then the next one, it says that there the council has missed out on funding through payment by result, and Staffordshire has been allocated as an appropriate partner. We need that money, we should get that money, etc. So I would suggest maybe it's more of a scrutiny item than an audit item, but that may well part of the request from this committee to ask for the appropriate scrutiny to look at that. Why was it not completed? Why has Staffordshire come in to actually assist this council in doing what it is there? And then to go on,
I think, Roger, I'll stop you a moment.
Okay.
Let James answer, and I'll
Yeah,
come back
okay,
to you.
yeah.
And then I've got to come to Jim in due course, and others as necessary. Right. Would you like to answer the 2 points that Roger has made?
Yeah, absolutely. Taking the second point first, I think you're absolutely correct, Roger. I think it's a matter for scrutiny. I think it should be as Vice Chair. I think you can raise that for scrutiny to consider. The reasoning as to why that happens. I haven't got the detail around that.
through, Jeff, I presume it'll be not the one committee that I'm chairman of. It might be the people scrutiny or something like that. That's what try raise it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That can be.
We will resolve that it's referred to the relevant scrutiny.
My point was it's at the discretion of the scrutiny chair to agree that, and with your position, you may have some influence over that happening. But that's where that will lie. In relation to the numbers of staff that have not completed it, so. This, at the end of the day, it's a complicated equation. This is the reason we set ourselves a target of 95% is because of there are a number of factors that we just can't control in terms of turnover, etc. To try and hit 100% is always going to be unreasonable. So we set our target at 95. So there is that element that will always kind of be missed as part of this. When we look at the staff numbers, we'll have people who have just started that haven't yet done the training. There'll be people that are about to leave. They may be leaving in a week or 2 weeks' time, and they haven't done their training. It's slightly overrun. So those will probably, in reality and practically, not be done. We do have staff that may access IT, literally once a month to view their pay slip or whatever, and so don't regularly have access into the IT systems, but nevertheless have an email address or a license or whatever, and therefore are on the list. So all of those need to be dealt with. When we looked at this last year, we had a real push across the organisation. We spent a lot of time and effort rooting out all of those individuals that hadn't done the training, and it was several hundred, as Roger suggests. What we had to do was to use the IT business partners to literally be phoning people, helping them through accessing into the right part of the website to do the training, and talking them through it to get it done in a number of cases. That was incredibly resource intensive to get that through. We did get the target up to above 95% as a result of that. But the reality is that is completely unsustainable. There's no way that we can continue to do that in the long term. So we, after that big push, we then let the organisation kind of rest to see whether we could maintain that level, given the push that we're given. And what happened was, over a period of time, it dropped back down into the sort of the mid-80s percent level, which is where it's kind of generally sitting at the moment. Hence, we need a process that is sustainable, that is not as resource intensive, that is built more around the technological processes that will enable us to keep that percentage high. And that's the way that we're doing it. And as I say, once that process is in place, we can do that. So the point being, we can get it to above that target, but we can't do it in a sustainable way at the moment.
That's your first 2 points answered, Roger. You had another point, I think.
Yes, Chairman. If I go on to items 6 and 7 on page 38, and I've James referred it obliquely, just item 6, I will be taking up via a scrutiny committee that I'm on. £5 million investment available. We've invested £2 million as a result of council last week, but there's still £3 million of investment still there, and we need that. It isn't part of audits, maybe part of scrutiny. I'll be progressing that. But if one looks at 7 and down it, at the bottom of that page, there is the August 23 budget performance dashboard. I went into that, and it shows that in August 23, if I expanded it correctly. We are running a deficit of just over £35 million on our budget. An overspend of £35 million is identified within that dashboard. We received assurances at Q1 that we were on board and it was coming down, etc., etc. But if one expands that table that is there, it shows that the people directorate have overspent by 20, or predicted overspend by £23 million, placed by £7.9 million, and the resources by £3.4 million are over budget. As audit committee, and for this year, it would be good to know exactly why and the wherefores and what action is being taken to bring that within the agreed budget. So if I stop there for a few minutes to go on that, it says on the side of it, review and improve functionality and reporting from the ERP system, and it's that dashboard that is there. Many members have asked for up to date, and at present members have only been supplied with Q1 up to the end of June. But this dashboard, if I've read it correctly, is for the end of August rather than the beginning of August. I'm not sure. Hence my questions. £35 million is what that dashboard shows, and that's almost 6 months into the financial year. Thank you, Chairman. I'll leave it at that.
I'm not quite sure whether this really is an audit matter, more a cabinet matter, I would have thought, to monitor the actual spend. We'll see. I'll see what James has to say on the matter.
Thank you, Chair. So the position that's shown in there is the performance dashboard, which is as at the end of August 23, which is the latest position and information that we have, and it's a demonstration of the information that is available to budget holders to enable them to manage their position. I just have to refer the member back to Cabinet on the 6th of September, where in section 2.8 of the Q1 monitoring report, it was made very clear that the business as usual forecast before any planned mitigations, in brackets, do nothing, figure at that point was 37.6 million. So you can see how the 37.6 million shown in that report has now become 36.2 million by the end of August. What was then is not shown on our dashboard, but was shown within the Q1 report, was the further savings of £11.9 million and the demand mitigation figure of 20.5 million, which led to a planned operating overspend of £5.2 million. So the information is absolutely consistent with the information that's been provided to members. And in terms of the breakdown of that overspend, Q1 gave a very, very detailed breakdown of all of the overspends in each of the individual teams and service areas, which in total came to the figure that I quoted early on, £37.6 million, which was at that point in time. So what you can see is that at Q1, the details showed 37.6. The latest dashboard has shown that that has now contracted to 36.2. What it isn't showing, because that's not in that particular dashboard, is the other savings and other mitigation, which is being taken forward with the transformation partner to bring in at Q1 a projected overspend of £5.2 million.
Thank you. Obviously, it's a very concerning matter, but I think I'm going to ask you to take that as a question to Cabinet, a member's question to Cabinet, quite frankly. I don't, because we can't answer that now till November, and I think we want some assurance on that before that time.
Yeah, and I understand the point, Chairman, and I will, but the members have been asking for dashboards and up to date, and all that they've been supplied with at present is Q1, and it's good to see that it's there so that members can now see exactly where we are on the dashboard. And as we're only towards the end of September, it's good to see what August's figure were.
Well, thank you for your approval for that. Right, Jim, you've been
Yeah,
waiting so patiently.
Well,
Indeed. I just want to come back to the cyber security thing. That when we looked at that during our training session a few months ago, we spoke about the fake phishing emails going out more often, and employees being given instant feedback, congratulating them if they identified the fake, and if not, telling them the risks that they're exposing the council to. Did that ever get any legs? Did that get going, or was that just a discussion at the time?
Thanks through you, Chair. Yeah, I haven't got the detail. I'm not aware that that's actually in play at the moment, but you're absolutely right. That was discussed as an approach. I would say David Baker is in the building at the moment, so and I know there were other parts of the agenda where IT may be a basis for some questions to be asked. I can call David into the meeting if that doesn't help. But I'd rather call him in for a block of things together. So if that's necessary later on in the agenda, I'll call him in and we can perhaps come back to this particular question if that would be helpful.
Sure. It's just a very powerful tool to make employees and potentially members aware of what these things look like, and it does create some energy around training, for example, and things like that to get it done. So that's my experience. Thanks.
Well, when we have our break at 11:30. You might like to contact him and see if he's there.
Yep, can do that.
Okay. Shall we note the actions taken so far? I think that's as much as we would wish to resolve. We note the actions taken so far. Because this will undoubtedly come back to us in the course of our next few months. Right, we now move to agenda item 8. Internal audit performance. This again is a report that should give all of us, and certainly gives me very great concern that we are unable, due to staff shortages, to carry out all the audits we would wish to do. But Barry is going to take us through this report.
Thank you, Chair. And just to reiterate Brian's comments, the revisions to the plan based on the resources are actually included within the report. So the 23-24 internal audit plan was presented to and approved by Audit Committee in February of this year, with the caveat that there could be adjustments that may be necessary in year. This report provides an update on the progress made against that plan and includes the revisions. So the 2023-24 plan revisions provide a total of 1,289 days. Now that's a reduction of 510 days from those approved by committee in February. These changes have been necessitated through the reduction in available resources, and whilst taking into account the change in risk environment, the revisions to the plan have been targeted to provide enough audit activity across the organisation to inform an overall year-end opinion. So since the last update, 2 auditors have left the team, and a principal auditor is due to leave at the end of October. So whilst additional resource has been secured through buying in from an external provider, the external provider contract is something that we've used for a number of years now, going back to 2013-14. It is a good way to provide internal audit services. However, it does come at a greater cost to the organisation, and there are less days available buying in through that route. So our preference is always to recruit internally on a permanent basis. So those changes are necessary in that respect. So in the short term, in light of the reduction in available resources, significant changes to the planned activity are required. The contingency call-off list has been removed, and that's there are a number of audits that we'd already brought onto our audit plan from the call-off list, and those pieces of work have actually been commenced prior to the resignations that we received, and therefore that work needs to be continued and completed. So we will continue to do that. unsatisfactory audits with fundamental recommendation follow-ups will be delayed until the next financial year, with the exception of payroll, which is a planned piece of work. So in terms of the reports that have been finalised to September from April the 1st, 23, 31 final reports have been issued. They're all listed with their assurance rating and broken down by service area at paragraph 8.8 of the report. And the pie chart at 8.6 shows you the distribution of those. So at this stage, given the limited data that we've got from the audit work that has been finalised to date, it's difficult to look or rely on any patterns that are emerging, since the audit reviews completed varies to previous years, and there is no strong pattern attracting lower levels of assurance. In the period up to the 3rd of September 23, 20 reports have been issued providing good or reasonable assurances, which account for 64% of the opinions that have been delivered. So this represents a slight increase in the higher levels of assurance for this period compared to the previous year outturn of 62%. But that's offset by a corresponding decrease in the number of limited and unsatisfactory assurance levels, currently 36% for the period. Of the previous outturn was 38%. So 10 draft reports are currently awaiting for management responses, which will be included in the next performance report. And across those 31 reports that we've issued to date, there have been 182 recommendations made in those reports, and those are broken down by service area, paragraph 8.8. There are, and I'd like to draw these to the attention of the committee, 2 fundamental recommendations that have been identified. They're in relation specifically in IT contract management and disposable IT equipment. And the question is whether members would like to receive any further updates in relation to those areas in particular. I will leave it there, Chair, and ask. I will take any questions.
Chair, yeah. What is the statutory requirement in this area? We're not potentially going to fall foul of something that a regulator picks up when we're in trouble.
In terms of
the internal audit process and level of scrutiny that's delivered to the departments and processes.
So essentially, as an internal audit function, we need to comply with the internal audit, the public sector internal audit standards. Okay, so in terms of that, we need to be providing an internal audit service that covers the right areas in order for us to deliver a balanced year-end opinion on the internal control environment. And that's what I was referring to there in terms of the number of days that we've got available and being able to adjust the resources that we can actually deliver that opinion.
So the audit delivers the opinion, and the opinion is the confidence.
Essentially, yeah. So
all can't deliver that opinion, we're a problem.
Absolutely, yeah. So at this stage, with the resources that we've got, with the changes that we're proposing, we will be able to cover enough areas to be able to deliver that opinion at year end. Okay. But yes, we are having to make some significant changes to the planned work in order to achieve that.
And my second, okay, thanks for that, because obviously we don't want to get tangled with anybody from that point of view. Is the actual number of hours is declining from not only from the plan, but it's actually going to be lower than last year's level. When you look at that on page 76, total Shropshire Council planned work, down to 847 days, is that? And it was 900 and something last year, 960 days. So we're 12% lower in audit days than last year. That's concerning to me. How concerning is that to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an obvious concern, and the recruitment market and the turnover of staff has been higher over the last 12 to 18 months, and particularly since COVID, it has been higher than we would normally expect from natural wastage through people moving on. We have been through, as Katie alluded to earlier on, we've been through a recruitment exercise during July, which wasn't successful. We are looking at other ways to go out to the market to recruit, but essentially as external audit have the same experience in terms of recruiting qualified and experienced professionals is tricky and the market is tough. So we need to adjust our approach in order to get the resource into the team to be able to deliver those assurances, and that's what we're currently working on at the moment.
Cool.
It is a concern.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for the feedback. And just one final comment. Something that we adopted in industry was that a self-assessment audit tool, where each department had their own list of audits that they had to complete themselves and provide evidence to that audit, and then they had to do 1 or 2 a month, and there was this person in the department responsible for completing that. So that would happen every year. So each department would have to audit themselves every year over the 12-month period, and then the internal audit group would remotely check that that's happening. There's no lapses and delays. And then periodically, at an extended period, because they had this assurance that the internal audit was happening by the departments themselves, would then come in and do a physical verification of that. It was just something that was done because of the limited, or not actually to reduce cost on internal audit, to devolve that responsibility.
Yeah.
We've heard about the problems with devolving responsibility with the FOI, so it's not a panacea, but it is potentially something to think about in the future.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank
Somebody else.
Could I just come in a moment? Because I've got a call upon you for something, Katie. You will all be aware, I'm sure, that there is a national shortage of auditors. It's not a profession which appears to be particularly popular at the moment. And I'm sure Grant, too, would confirm that even the external companies are struggling to recruit adequate staff to meet their commitments. In that context, I was concerned that we should concentrate what staff we have on the major audits, the ones that really would affect either the financial standing or the reputational standing of the council. And I expressed why the heck are we doing audits on the Abbott's Wood Comforts Fund, which sounds like some sort of petty cash somewhere, and the Aquamarina Comforts Fund, whatever that might be. These are on page 69, which are plainly very minor audits. And Katie had a very interesting point to make on this, which I hope she will make to you, as to why we do some minor audits, even though we're very short of staff. So come in, Katie, now.
Okay, if I respond to Jim's point first, then I'll come back to you if that's okay. In terms of self-assessments, it is something that we do use, and we've used it. We use it on the schools audits. The difficulty is in getting people to supply the evidence to back it up, because people are quite often a bit more optimistic about where they are. So, and we have used it during COVID when some of the team were redeployed into other areas of the council. So there were key areas where we asked for self-assessments, and those were reflected in the information we shared with the audit committee. So it is something that's in our box of tools as such, but there is a significant resource that still needs to go into verifying those, and as you correctly identified, devolving some of that responsibility hasn't worked so well. In other areas, you do need that oversight to make sure people are doing it in the right way. So that's something that Barry and I will be considering, that we're in the process of at the moment, looking at where we can map assurance and get alternative sources of assurance to direct our resources better, which quite nicely ties into Brian's point on the types of audit that appear in the plan. So as he quite rightly identified, the comforts funds aren't ones that would rate in terms of significance on the strategic risks, but our audit planning process has to take into account both the strategic risk environment and the available resources we've got within the team. So last year we had a number of new trainee auditors, so we have to adjust the kind of audits that we have to suit the skills that we have, and those are an excellent training ground for auditors. So that said, though, they do provide an insight into the activity of the organisation. It gives you real substantive detail of how those central policies are being applied. And whilst they are small in value, it gives a feel for how people are controlling the finances, so how they might be dealing with income and those central processes that have evolved out to the area. So it gives us a flavour of what's going on in the wider organisation. But yeah, ordinarily, at this point in time, with the resources we've got, we wouldn't be bringing those kind of audits into our audit plan.
Thank you, Katie. I'm sure members will agree with me that there should be no lowering of performance in terms of the major audit, or skimping in terms of the major audits, in order to achieve volume. To my mind, it's absolutely essential that the major audits which affect financial and reputational aspects of this council must have the full attention, and that we don't in any way, our staff don't in any way try to achieve volume, that achieve more audits in terms of numbers, rather than concentrating their resources on the ones that are of major concern. I'm sure if you would wish to say,
yeah, if I may, Brian, yeah, I do absolutely agree with that, and the way that the internal audit service operates is in compliance with the public sector internal audit standards, which means that we have to conduct the scoping of the audit work, the level of testing that we undertake, the way that is reported, the way it's responded to, the way the recommendations are followed up and reported to audit committee are all defined within those standards. We have to work to that. So irrespective of what audit is undertaken at whatever point during the year, it will follow those standards. So if it is a planned piece of work that is undertaken in year, it will follow those standards. Just want to give that assurance to the committee.
Thank you, Barry. Right, members, shall we note
Chairman.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't realise.
Roger was first. We haven't gone round yet. You've taken two, but we haven't finished.
Goodness me, I take your reproof, Nigel. Roger.
I note the audits that we did, and one of them concerns me a little, and that is on page 61, the blue badge scheme, 22, 23. And then over the pages on page 70, there's the blue badge scheme there. Presumably that's when we did it previously in 2015-16.
Correct.
Did it in 22-23. I see there's 9 requires attention, as well as 1 limited. As a member and out in the public, I'm getting phone calls from blue badge users when they contact the council. One who contacted me 10 days ago, trying to renew their blue badge, was told they couldn't do it, they were too early. Then they tried to renew their blue badge and it went in, and it's taken so long for it to be renewed. It's now out of date, and they were served a parking notice last week. And I've seen a memo from the council saying that please ensure your blue badge is in date when you use it. If the council has got a procedure in place where you can't renew it too early, and then when they try to renew it, we do not renew it in time, and this person had a disability which was a permanent one, a walk-in one which has been there for some time. There's no chance that it will be, it will get better. But that person has got a parking permit. They tried to renew it and they weren't started. I don't know what the requires attention is, or the limited one, but that And I understand that one or two other councillors are also having problems with blue badge renewal. It's been the subject of a question at full council and a reply, and there was extra staff going to be employed, and we are going to try and reduce it back down to the norm. Is that part of the findings that you found here? Thank you, Chairman.
Do you want to? Are you able to respond to that now?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So in terms of the blue badge audit, absolutely the overall assurance level was limited. Also about the blue badge scheme is it's part of a national scheme, so the application process, the software that sits behind it is part of a government scheme, so it's not all directly within the council's control in terms of the deadlines. That said, I don't have all the detail of it, but given the limited and unsatisfactories, it's within the committee's power to ask for a management update in that area if you've got concerns, or if because of the limited assurance you want extra management assurance to say what they're doing to address it, you could ask them to come back to a future meeting to give you that management assurance.
If I can, Chairman, due to the numbers of requests, comments that are being made, I think it would be useful if they did come back to explain, because as I understand it, we are outside the stated numbers, but the council would reply and issue the appropriate blue badge. So yes, I would request that.
Who actually runs the blue badge scheme? You know, who is the senior officer in charge of the blue badge scheme?
There's been a bit of change lately. Let me just double check.
Might take a second to get that
No, well,
information.
I was merely wondering whether the committee would like to have him here at our next meeting to explain how the situation works.
For me, yes, Chairman.
Yeah. Right, so we'll agree that we will ask the head of the Blue Badge organisation.
If I can, Chair, I take the point that Jim made about it, and it's a small scheme, but it does affect a particularly minority of residents in Shropshire who are having problems.
Yes, okay, so we'll agree that we'll have a verbal report at the next meeting.
It's Francis Darling, who is head of, bear with me, head of business and consumer protection.
Right. Invite Francis to come and explain the whole problem with the blue badge scheme at the next meeting. What? Sorry.
Would you want to invite David into this meeting? James mentioned earlier about the IT update.
Well, quite frankly, if both of them are available, we'll have them later on this meeting. So when we close I'll close at the end of this item for a break, and we'll see if we can get either of them if they're available, or if they can come online. Quite frankly, if they're working from home, they can come online and join us. Yeah. Rosemary.
Chair, just regarding David, David's in the middle of rehashing the training, isn't he? I thought he was redesigning how we do the cyber security training for members and for staff. Have I misunderstood that?
I don't think he was revising the training course. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
online training course.
The manner of delivering it and how best to get better responses.
I don't recall that he was changing the I think we use a leading to learning for the two cybersecurity and data protection training for that.
He was definitely working on changing the way the whole thing works together, perhaps not the actual package. But I just thought maybe it's better to get him back at a time when he's got something concrete to bring to us before it goes out. I don't know. Perhaps we start.
Well, if it's available, we'll see.
You can answer that question directly.
Yes, you can ask that question directly. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. You alluded to it at the start of this subject that you were uncomfortable about what you heard in regard to how audit was being cut. I want to echo that and say the old maxim, money's tight, cut audit. Now, and that sounds very much like this. You were just about to say, well, as an audit, then we'll note it. I really would like something far stronger put there, that actually we are deeply uncomfortable by how much the audit has been cut back. And I think we ought to note that. And we also haven't gone into why this time. And we've discussed this a year ago when it was cut back then. Are we not paying them enough, basically, is what I'm getting at?
Well, I quite frankly, we're cutting back because we simply can't employ. We've got an audit team number, an audit establishment. Unfortunately, we can't fill that establishment because we can't get the auditors, or if they come, for instance, the principal auditors that are leaving us has only been with us a year. They come here and they get poached by other organisations, both local authorities and private audit companies, finance companies, with what they consider to be better offers. Well, the answer to your question, briefly, but I'll ask Barry to go into further, is that we wouldn't wish to be up to establishment. That establishment has been there for years, about 11 full-time auditors, I think, Barry will tell us. We try and recruit to that if we could, but we simply have been able to attract auditors of the right standard. Barry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. To reiterate that point, it is very much that, you know, and it's as I mentioned earlier on, the issue within the market is very difficult from a recruitment perspective at the moment. And whilst, you know, we've been out to the market and been unsuccessful, we are looking at other ways to fill that resourcing gap in terms of the recruitment. Where we will end up, you know, in terms of filling that void is yet to be seen. But obviously, concerningly for us, it's been a downward trajectory in terms of being able to recruit. And also, once we have recruited, again, you know, the retention of those individuals, I am comfortable that the officers who are moving on, that have moved on in the last sort of 12 months, have done so for the right reasons. And particularly the principal auditor who's due to leave at the end of October, he is moving to a audit manager, a head of audit role in Essex down south near where he lives. So it's a concern, but one that we're seeking to address.
Yes, so basically, Nigel, we have not reduced the establishment. The council has not reduced its audit establishment. It simply can't fill that establishment.
If I can, Chairman, and it's directed at James, I presume, I don't know, in that there's certain departments in this authority who have, to retain staff, have made the decision to offer an incentive to stop or have a plus payment on their appropriate grade. And it may be something that we may need to look at if they're being poached. If they want to stop working here, it might be a possibility. I don't know, but that will be up to the executive team to decide that.
Provide a general comment, Chair, if that's helpful. We do have a number of different options in place to try and recruit and retain individuals. The rates of pay that we have are in line with other authorities. There are opportunities to pay market supplements should that be deemed necessary. There's work that's being done at the moment around the shop window, demonstrating why Shropshire is a good place to work, not just from an internal audit point of view, but for, across the whole of the organisation. We do have a very open policy in relation to agile working, which allows us to recruit people from all across the country into a number of jobs where remote working is an option, which across a lot of internal audit work it is an option. That said, as the example that Barry gave, at the end of the day, somebody who can get a promotion and be very close to where they live, that's going to happen. So there are options, and there are certain sectors whereby where work is done that establishes that actually, yes, there's a clear shortage, there is a clear regional role that needs to be addressed, working with other authorities perhaps to ensure that there is a sufficient pool to recruit from. Actually, in some cases, agreeing not to pay market supplements to keep a level playing field is also just as important to ensure that recruitment happens across the region in an appropriate way. All of those are options available to us, and all of those are to be considered. They're not considered as the first option. The first option is you go out and try and recruit. Then it's only when that evidence then starts to build that there's a problem recruiting. You can't recruit a couple of times. You try different things. Then you then start to look at okay, are there other options available here? And so there's a whole series of opportunities to try and manage this risk. But just to reiterate the point that's being made, the risk is not as a result of pay levels being reduced, establishment being reduced. All of that is in line with where it was before. It's just we believe the market at the moment. That said, last year we did recruit very successfully to a couple of posts. So the question is it just difficult at the moment, or is this a long-term trend? We just don't know that at the moment.
Okay, well, I think our officers have noted all the concerns that we have, and we'll try and come back to with more detail where we've requested it. So shall we at this moment of time note the internal audit performance so far for 23-24? Agreed? Right, well, we will now take a break of 5 minutes or so to give Barry and Katie the opportunity, well, to give us the opportunity to comfort break. To give Barry and Katie the opportunity to see if they can find the relevant officers we like to have a word with. Okay, 5 minutes or so.
As you will notice, David Baker has joined us, and we thank him for appearing at very short notice in response to your request about freedom of information. So we're going off agenda for a moment to hear from David.
Cyber security.
Oh, cyber.
You just panicked, David.
Sorry, Brian, it was
Not me good.
the fundamental recommendations on IT contract management and disposal of IT equipment.
Right.
Yeah,
I apologise.
That was also in the report as well.
Right. We're on IT matters. So perhaps you would like to ask the questions of David that you raised at the meeting a little earlier. Rosemary.
Thanks, David, for joining us. I just had a quick question about the non-compliance members and some staff. We talked about it earlier with cybersecurity training. We talked about it earlier, and obviously we have staff with a variety of roles. And I think James mentioned earlier, people who probably log into their laptops, check emails once a week or once a month or whatever. And I think we have members with a variety of tech skills on the team, if you like. And I think that I just wonder, I mean, you know, how we reach those people, because we've got very different demographics within staff, and what your plans are to sort of manage to do that. I've heard that through group leaders and also today, that what we plan to do with members is to cut off their laptops if they don't comply. Now, I'm not sure whether that's a threat or a promise. I think I'd quite like to have mine cut off, actually. So, you know, in a way, it might be a welcome relief from the amount of mail that we all get. So I just wonder what your thoughts are about that.
It's always tricky. The challenge is, unless there's a concerted effort, people never keep it at the forefront of their mind, I suppose, because they're trying to think of all over the stuff in their day-to-day lives. So unless you're in the depths of IT and understand all the nuances of the security, then it's never really at the forefront of your mind. So how do we change that? And that's a cultural problem, I think. Turning the accounts off, I think, will help, but that's very much a stick type solution. And we need the other end of that as well. So what's the carrot? So if you don't comply with your training, we can automatically turn your account off, but there has to be the technical solution for that. Is very easy. So we can say you haven't done your training, you weren't compliant on this day, we've given you 7 days, you haven't done it, turn the account off. Dead easy. The problem then comes with the business processes. Okay, so we've now locked somebody on a laptop. How do we get them back in? How do we get them back in so they can just do the training element? What if they've got something really important on that cutting the laptop off will prevent them from, you know, providing some services to a vulnerable child, for example? So there's a few nuances that we have to work through before we can actually turn that on. It's pretty much ready to go, but that's what we're trying to work through at the moment. Will that then make people do their training? I don't know. It's the honest answer. But if they can't get back onto the kit, then that should start raising the questions. And if they have to keep ringing through to get back on, then that's going to be a bit of a pain for somebody, isn't it? And they just, so the other side of it, there's the carrot, I suppose. So when people do spot phishing links, for example, we do praise them at the moment when they push it through, but we don't do that for our phishing exercises at the moment. So when we push out phishing exercises to everybody, all that gets reported is these people clicked on the link. Whereas actually what we should be doing is saying, well done to all these other people who didn't click on the link, congratulations, etc., etc. Because organisations often think that people are the weakest link. They're not. They're actually the last line of defence, and they can be your strongest link. So if all the technology fails, you, as that last person, you can make the difference between us being secure and not secure. And it's how do we get that message across then to people that this is really important. I think some people don't do the training because they're afraid they won't pass it as well. So how do we tackle those individuals, and how do we, particularly people like you mentioned, saying, if I'm only going on a computer once a week, maybe my technical skills aren't up to scratch, and I don't want to do the training because it will highlight that maybe I don't know what I'm doing potentially. So how do we help those people that maybe aren't as technical confident to say, actually, if we were to put a session on maybe, and you come in and do that, would that enable us then to say, actually, you have the cyber training in an environment like this potentially instead, so that we can help and guide you through rather than trying to do it electronically? Would that help? So I don't think there's one answer for this, unfortunately. No. And trying to get as much feedback from everybody as we can is the only way forward. And the only way we can really do it is try things and turn it on, see what happens for 6 months. If the compliance rates aren't going up or they're falling, then we need to revisit that and think, well, how are we going to do this? I think you also need to understand that there's never ever going to be 100% compliance rate. It's infeasible. So what is a good compliance rate and what should we be aiming for? I think the compliance rate today was about 85%, something like that. Might change since I was looked at it, but that's roughly where we are. That's slightly down from last year. And I know there's a big effort to push people to do the training, and they went up for a period of time. And as that campaign dropped off, so has the compliance. However, that takes a lot of effort. So it's, I don't know the answer is what I'm trying to say. And all we can do is try different things, see what works. And once we find a formula that works, stick to it, I suppose. If there was a one-size-fits-all solution, we'd been doing it now because other organisations would be doing it as well. Yeah. I know that's quite convoluted response. Sorry.
I understand that, and I think one of the major things in teaching is that the different learning styles that people inherently have, and I think that's what you're up against, because there are some people who just won't learn in that, who won't be able to deal with the training as it is. So it's almost like we need a variety of solutions, and as you say, perhaps having sessions, briefing sessions, or sessions where people even come in is the right way to do it. I don't know.
Roger?
Yeah, to try and help maybe is that cyber security was pushed, data protection, and I seem to remember that I had a reminder just at the start of the summer, and I've forgotten about it. So, okay. But a good time would be at a full council meeting. If you can have somebody there to assist or to help those who are not very helpful with computer, because I know of 2 councillors where assistance was needed to help them to get through the cyber training. It might be useful at that time at the full council, because usually there's over 60 councillors in this building, and it may be a good time then to actually contact and talk with councillors. The staff you can do via the directors, but for councillors that may be a good time, for me anyway.
Well, plainly, we would have to go on the council agenda.
No, what I was meaning is, Chairman, that they are in the building so that they can go and do it themselves. And just a reminder that why don't you do it now for half an hour or an hour? Spend time now doing it. I wouldn't be on the council agenda. An announcement can be made by the chairman of council. Please do it. But they'd be in the building and they are get-atable.
Would you like to raise that through the group leaders meeting or something? Okay. Yeah. I think that's the forum to deal with that matter. We are not competent to deal with that matter here. Well, David, thank you for coming down to answer that question. Saved us request you coming at our November meeting, and we're grateful for you arriving here at short notice.
Did you want to pick up on the fundamental recommendations that were in their performance report around?
Oh yes, good point, Barry. Thank you for reminding me.
There are 2 fundamental recommendations that were in our report relating to the cyber security, and I find what the
Page 64, thank you. Right. One was the IT contract management, a risk that was supposed to be completed by June 2023. The management response, if I may remind you, was that managers who are responsible for contracts will be educated on the importance of keeping contracts and saving them in the centralised local, whatever centralised local may be. Payments and KPIs, etc., will be reviewed in line with the contract at contract management meetings, quarterly contract meetings, held with suppliers unless specifically differently in contract. So the date for all that to be actioned was June 2023. Was that completed?
Yes, it's a short answer. We've actually gone further than that, so we actually meet on a more frequent basis to discuss internal contracts. So we have a spreadsheet, probably what you're looking for that centralised locale, of all the contract information, when contract dates are coming up, who's responsible for it, values of the contracts, so that we shouldn't be getting any surprises in relation to when contracts are coming up or ending.
Thank you for that. The other was the disposal of IT equipment. A formal contract for disposal of IT equipment should be put in place as soon as possible. How is that going on?
We now have a contract in place. The contract term is for 2 years, so we're covered for the next 2 years, and then before that time we'll need to procure a new contract.
So basically, Barry, you'll be able to give a satisfactory audit opinion on those two functions.
Only once tested, Brian.
Well, we let us hope that your testing will allow you to give a satisfactory opinion. I think we've gone as far as we can on that matter today.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, there's the question about the phishing exercises. And we talked about in that training, I think, about giving the automatic feedback. Did you make progress on that, or looking at that?
So we've looked at it, it's not implemented. So the system we currently have doesn't allow us to automatically give the positive feedback that we were talking about. I think that's what we were talking about, wasn't it? Where we were saying, how could we automatically say, well
done, or
yeah,
you've exposed, or potentially
slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
So the system doesn't automatically do that for us. However, there's a praise system with a Microsoft called Microsoft Feedback, which is the well-being side of Microsoft 365, that will allow you to send compliments to colleagues on jobs well done. And we're looking at how we can extract the information from the phishing simulation software that we have to say, these are the people that did clicked on the link, these are the people that didn't click on the link, and these are the people that actually reported it. And how can we tie that into that Viva system to say, give the appropriate praise through that. So there's no simple solution with the current provider, but what we don't want to do is go out and procure something just so we can give praise and potentially spend more money on something like that, where doing a bit of jiggery pokery outside could actually.
Well, if you can make it work another way, it's just, as you mentioned, trying to change the culture, and we found that to be a very powerful tool. And also on the, I don't know if you have this on the action ribbon, there's actually an icon saying report phishing. So it's dead easy to do. If you think this email's a problem, just click this button, it'll go straight to the folks who deal with it.
We're looking at that as well at the moment. So some of the additional controls we got through Microsoft allow us to add that on, but we haven't got that in place at the moment. But it's exactly as you said, it's how do we change that culture piece from people realising that, you know, people get banded in the press for saying you're the weakest link. People are terrible, they're the worst part of your security. Whereas actually it's not. People can be the strongest part of your security. So how do we change that mantra around it?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for that. Okay, well, thank you, David, for your instant appearance when we required it. Now, we have another officer we've hoped to I join as work me.
This was in relation to blue badges, Chair.
Yes.
I've been unable to get hold of the relevant officers to provide an update. So,
Right, well, in that case, we'll have the relevant officer here in November.
Agreed. Okay. We now move on to 9, item 9, second line assurance, approval of the council statement accounts for 21-22. James.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so there are two papers, items 9 and items 10, which look very, very similar. One is the approval of the Secretary of Accounts 21-22, which is this, and then the next paper is 22-23. I think it might be just worth me taking a second just to talk about the Secretary of Accounts process, because I'm aware that when a number of councillors came on to Audit Committee following the elections in May 21, we've followed anything but a standard process in terms of signing off our accounts. So in the kind of the old days, which is literally only 3 or 4 years ago, we would complete the accounts and a draft set of accounts would be produced by the end of May, following the end of the financial year. So by the end of May, a draft set of accounts would be approved. That would then come to Audit Committee, and Audit Committee would approve those a draft set of accounts and ask any relevant questions they needed to around that. The external audit would have then started from the 1st of June, and that would be completed by the 31st of July. What we then would have is, towards the end of July, we would have a council meeting whereby the accounts would then be signed off formally by the council, and that would be dealt with. Because the accounts, because that meant council having to call to set at towards the end of July, which you'll see in the holiday period, that was sometimes quite difficult to arrange. So then it was delegated, the council agreed to delegate the approval of the accounts to Audit Committee, which then meant Audit Committee would have to sit before the end of July, and then the accounts would be dealt with. So the reason for me telling you this is that the reality is that you then move into August and the accounts for the previous year would be dealt with. And we had a very clear process. Since 2021, there has been a number of issues which have delayed accounts being signed off. You'll have seen things within the national press. This is certainly not a Shropshire Council issue. This is certainly not a Grant Thornton issue. This is an issue that is being felt across the country. So we've only very recently got the 2021 accounts signed. We now still have the 21-22 and the 22-23 to be signed off. So this is a further update, and Audit Committee is now seeing about 3 or 4 updates in relation to the 21-22 accounts. We haven't appended the full set of accounts because we don't want 200 pages to be added each time. Normally, as I say, that just come once. It's already come 2 or 3 times already. So in the executive summary in the report, it sets out the timescales that we worked to, and for that 21-22 set of accounts. Following the COVID period, following adjustments that were made in terms of those statutory deadlines, things did shift. And so there's just a breakdown there of why the draft accounts were produced slightly later and then into the external audit process. In terms of the 21-22 accounts, we then had the accounting for infrastructure assets issue, which came up before our accounts were signed off. That then led to further work. There's then the IAS 19 restatement work, and then finally, just as we thought we were getting over the line, along comes RAC, and at that point we then need to go and assess the valuations of all our assets to see whether they are impacted by the RAC within those buildings. So this is really just an update to say we need you there, and Grant and Mary may wish to comment in terms of where we are with that, but I had a meeting with them earlier in the week, and in terms of the 21-22 accounts, we're very, very nearly there.
It's just a few final bits and pieces of information that are just being going backwards and forwards. There is no major or substantive changes outside of those that have been indicated within this report. So that information is there just for completeness. And I think we said that we would be hoping that within the next 2 weeks we would have those accounts finally signed off, which then means that November audit committee, we can then bring a final report that just then allows audit committee to kind of sign off that final position. And I'll be saying a very similar thing in relation to three accounts in item 10 in a moment. But in terms of 21-22, I'll stop there. Say, Chair, I don't know whether Grant Thornton wish to comment on their latest position, but I'm happy to take him.
Well, I don't think it's necessary for him to comment. If they're coming to us in November, let us go straight to the Rosemary.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. To just check on the rack aspect that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that we'll have full reports on the rack situation to allow us to progress within November now?
Okay, so thank you, Chair. My understanding is that an assessment has been undertaken, and that initial assessment has indicated that none of our schools were impacted by RAC, and then in terms of our administrative buildings, council buildings, there was only, I think, it's Whitchurch Civic Centre, which has been publicly stated. That has been the only impact. To do a full assessment of all of our buildings in relation to this is going to take in the order of sort of 8 to 10 weeks. So the plan as it stands is that because we have sufficient evidence to suggest it's not an issue, but we haven't done the belt and braces approach, what we can do is identify this as a contingent liability within the accounts. So basically it says we know there might be an issue, and we're kind of demonstrating how that's being contained. That will, providing are comfortable with that statement, that would potentially allow us to sign off the accounts in a couple of weeks. By the time we then go back in November, then that full assessment would have been dealt with, and the whole issue will be hopefully a line will be drawn under that. But what I don't want to do, if we can avoid it, is keep the accounts open while that is done, because I guarantee something else will come
Exactly.
and we'll be here for.
I'm sure the committee are very grateful that you have concrete proposals for dealing with this matter. Apparently, Grant, I was going to bring you in on both after the next paper, which is the 22-23, but if you've something.
Yes, I was just going to say about 21-22, and James has actually alluded to one of the matters. Is I'm totally on board with James and yourselves for closing down 21-22 as soon as possible. The two elements that are really just slightly delaying us further are sort of national emerging issues. One is the RAC issue that the councillors have just mentioned. Another bit is in terms of relation to equal pay. We are just circulating all of our clients just to get comfortable about their equal pay arrangements. From our work at Shropshire, I have no issue that concerns around equal pay, but we may well just require some disclosure letter of rep. So hopefully we resolve or get the information back next week, and then we will be looking. I was going to say we will be looking to issue our opinion on the 21-22 financial statements ahead of the next audit committee. So just that was really just to confirm that we're hoping to do that in the next week or next couple of weeks going forward. So.
Thank you, Grant.
Sorry,
Roger wants to come in now.
Just very quickly,
All right.
if we can. Sorry, I should have just mentioned the equal pay issue, just to confirm that is another question that's been raised by Grant Thornton, and we will just produce a statement. We don't believe it's a material risk in any way to Shropshire Council, but it's just to confirm that. I didn't want to suggest that by not suggesting it was when I'm referring to it might have been an issue. It's not. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed that SIPFA has issued a message today that because of RAC, there's certain external auditors are wondering about finishing their audit, but so it's good news that we can do that contingent, because as I understand it, there are just 22 schools which are being investigated at the moment, whether they've got RAC, whether it's a problem or not. So, yeah, but as I say, I note in the SIPFA that some auditors are saying that it may be unduly delayed now because of the asset value of this rate.
Thank you for that. The recommendations are on paragraph 3 on page 78. Shall we agree those recommendations as set out? Agreed? Yes. Okay, thank you. We now move on to agenda item 10, approval of the council's statement of accounts for 22-23. James again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll give a very brief introduction to this. So you've heard the history in relation to the way that this works. Again, within the executive summary, we've set out the tasks and the deadlines and where they have been dealt with. As previously reported, we produced the draft statement of accounts by the 31st of May deadline, and our hope was that the external audit could be completed by the 30th of September. Had that been completed, we would have then been able to review and deal with those today. As it is, as I said earlier, I did have a conversation with Mary and Grant, and we believe collectively that we will be able to hit the audit committee for November to ensure that the 22-23 accounts are signed off. Again, adjustments that have been made following the information, the work that's been done so far, are demonstrated within the report itself. Again, Grant Thornton may wish to comment. Again, I'm quite happy to take questions.
Do Grant Thornton wish to comment?
I don't think we necessarily to comment. We were going to present the plan. I'm not quite sure whether you want us to update you on the plan as part of this or in terms of 22-23. The overall comment is yes, we are not going to hit the end of September deadline. I think in terms of our resourcing, it was always going to be a very tight, and we were planning probably to finish a little bit later. But as long as the information and we've had some really good dialogue with Nikki and the team in terms of finance continues to flow, then yes, we do believe that the November Audit Committee is achievable for us in terms of the opinion and in relation to that. So I don't know if you want to, because Mary is going to take you through the plan. I don't know if you want us to go straight into that or whether you want to make comments first of all. So
I will just pass a resolution on this after Roger's spoken or anybody else.
Thank you, Chairman. In 8.4, it says there have been no schools identified in Shropshire. It may be correct, but there are investigations being carried out in 22 schools. So no schools yet been identified. And we've got nothing to say that they will be, but there are priority investigations being carried out, as I understand it.
So can you say, yeah, that refers to my point earlier, 8 to 10 weeks for the work to be completed to give a comprehensive review. As it stands at the moment, we are not aware of that.
I think also that we're looking at other public buildings, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Not just schools.
Absolutely. It's a comprehensive review of all the assets owned by the authority.
Yep. I think we can move to our resolution on this, and then you'll come in on the next two items, Grant. So
okay.
The recommendation is there. Consider the amendments currently proposed, etc. Shall we agree the recommendation as recommended to us? Okay, thank you very much. Now, you've waited very patiently for over 2 hours to give us the benefit of your considerations.
Well, I'm going to pass over. Sorry, I'm going to pass over someone with much more wisdom than myself, and that's Mary who's going to take you through the plan. So take it from there.
Good. So we're now on to item 11, External Audit Shropshire Council Audit Plan for 22-23. Very comprehensive report. We should look forward to your introduction, Mary, comments on it.
Thank you, Chair. So I will keep this as a high level summary. It is a detailed report. I just want to notify a couple of changes. It is a plan, but we are well progressed. So this work is ongoing with the finance team currently. So if I could just take you to the key areas of our report and where we focus most of our time is around those significant risk areas. If I take you to page 7, I'm sure to many committee members, these will be quite familiar risks. There are two risks we must consider as part of auditing standards. These are the presumed risk of fraud in revenue and expenditure recognition and management override of controls. Management override of controls is on page 8. We cannot rebut that risk. We do have to do work around that, and that will be present in every audit plan that is across the country. So you're certainly not unique there. Most of our work in that area is around your journals and journal controls. We have been able to rebut the risk of fraud in revenue and expenditure. So as you can see on page 7, we do quite a detailed amount of work in these areas, but they are not areas we have identified as significant risks. So if I could take you to pages 8 and 9, the remaining significant risks are areas which continue to be areas of audit focus, which revolve around property, plant and equipment and the council's net pension fund liability. So this is consistent with prior years, but there is a change that I would just like to highlight with members. We have, since this report was written, done a detailed risk assessment of your asset portfolio, and that broadly falls into 3 categories, which is other land and buildings, council dwellings and investment property. So within this plan, we have identified council dwellings as a significant risk. That risk assessment now indicates that category of asset is not a significant risk. The reality, most of our audit procedures will remain the same. However, the risk assessment is that it's not a significant risk. We have done further work on the risk assessment around investment properties. There are some investment properties where there has been movement outside of our expectation. So we will be moving that into the significant risk category. Again, it doesn't significantly affect the work we do around property, plant and equipment. But when you see our audit findings report, you will see that investment property is now classified as a significant risk. So that train will be within the audit findings report. I just wanted to flag that. If I could take you through to page 11, there are other risks. We have to cover all material balances within our audit procedures, but there are 2 areas, and although they're not significant risks, they do take quite a proportion of audit time. So these are risks around the completeness of your expenditure. Have you got expenditure in the right accounting period? Ultimately, we look at expenditure recorded after the period end and sample test that is quite a high sample volume there. And we also spend a significant amount of time around your cash balances as well, which is largely through external confirmation. And because of the sensitivity of cash balances, if cash balances are wrong, generally you will find other things that are wrong in the financial statements. So they are 2 areas we do focus on, and they're on page 11 of our report. Your group arrangements haven't changed. They're detailed on pages 12 and 13. I wasn't going to go into that in any more detail. We generally carry out a high-level analytical review of your group arrangements, and that the work we do in that area hasn't changed compared to the prior year. If I could take you to page 14, I just want to highlight our other powers and responsibilities under the Code of Audit Practice. It is quite topical at the moment, a fair amount in the press about this, so I did want to just highlight it. Isn't something that is relevant particularly to Shropshire Council. We do have an ongoing objection to a prior year, but I did just want to flag that page around our other responsibilities. If I could move you on to page 15, our audit work is all done in the context of materiality, and as you'll see on pages 15 and 16, the level of materiality we apply to the audit hasn't changed compared to the prior year. And what that means is we apply a level of £9 million to your group financial statements and a slightly lower amount of £8.9 million to your single entity statements. Obviously, we report at a much lower level, and we call that level a triviality. Any error we identify above £450,000 is reported through in our audit findings report to this committee. And on page 16, you will see we apply a very small level of materiality to senior officers' remuneration and disclosures, as it's often seen as quite a sensitive area of the accounts. If I could take you through to our value for money arrangements, which Grant may want to comment on at the end of the report. On page 19, we'd identified two risks of significant weakness around financial sustainability and the Ofsted report into children's care. So they are areas of focus for us. In accordance with National Audit Office guidance, we can produce a joint report, and that is what has happened for 21-22 and 22-23. So that report is well progressed, and Grant's looking to share that report over the next few weeks. We do have to formally communicate to you as those charged with governance regarding those arrangements, and there is a letter attached to Appendix A of the plan in relation to that. If I could take you to page 22, obviously wonderful picture of myself and Grant on there. So our audit, it is progressing well. We did have a small delay in relation to some of the work we do around IT, which did delay slightly our work on journals. That's back on track now. We have a very good relationship with Central Finance and work closely with them. So we do propose to bring a draft AFR and draft opinion into the November Audit Committee, as James alluded to. Finally, if I could take you to our audit fees, which are on page 22. There are a number of things we need to report here. A detailed breakdown is on page 23. We also have to report other work we do for you. Now, that is largely around grants, certification, housing benefits, the pooling of capital receipts, and the teacher's pension grant claim primarily. We also do audit star housing. That is done by a separate audit team. As it forms part of your group arrangements, we do have to report that audit fee to you, and that's on page 22 of the audit plan. I wasn't going to go into any more detail, but more than happy to take any questions, as I'm sure is Grant. So I'll pause there.
If I could ask you for one clarification and take you to page 13 of your report. At the top, there is a coloured block which refers to the audit of the financial information of the component using component materiality. For the benefit of somebody non-financial, what exactly does that statement mean? Audit of the financial information of the component using component materiality. Could you explain that in simple terms?
In simple terms, Chair, for Shropshire Council, we will use the group accounts level of materiality. So appreciate the confusion there, and that can actually be updated. But ultimately, we will use the £9 million in Shropshire Council's group financial statements.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, what we're saying there is because your group, every item in the group, including the council, we say is a component. And what we're saying in that process is we're only going to do a sort of full audit on the council's accounts using the materiality that Mary said. On the other components, we can look at their reported financial statements and do an analytical review. So basically, yeah, so that's the way the audit runs.
I've got it now. It was just the way it was stated. Anything else on this? Or shall we accept the external audit report with thanks to our external auditors? Agreed. We now move again to the audit, Grant Thornton, informing the audit risk assessment for 22-23. Item 12. Grant, again, please.
I think it's going to be Mary again, Chair. So that's
right.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Much shorter presentation. Appreciate it. It is a lengthy document. So as part of our audit planning and a quite a key document to producing the audit plan, we ask a number of questions of management. So this document is the forum to really pull that information together, to put it in front of you as those charged with governance, and triangulate all of those responses. So I'm not going to go into the detail. I appreciate it's 36, 37 pages, but it's really to get your view as to, is this your understanding of what happens with the council? Is there anything that you want to add to management responses? So I wasn't going to go into detail within the report, but it's your opportunity to comment on management responses within that. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members? No, there being no questions on this. Thank you for the clarity of the report, which has enabled, obviously satisfied all members' interest in the matter. Right, we now need to, I presume,
Note the report with thanks. Note and accept the report with thanks. Agreed? Okay. Item 13 is to note the date and time of the next meeting. The next meeting of this committee will be held on the 23rd of November at 10 a.m. You know that. We now come to item 14, exclusion of press and public. We have to resolve that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972,